this administration. So when you saw that headline, what first came to mind for you?
Well, I've long believed, I think a lot of us have believed that the Biden administration's been blowing it on a lot of fronts, but I guess it's a little bit more literal than even I had thought. I can tell you in Florida, my wife and I, we have a 6'5" and a 3-year-old running around the governor's mansion. So that's not something that we see. We do have to occasionally get slime out of the carpet and get marker off the wallpaper, but that's the extent of our adventures at the governor's mansion.
You know, it's so interesting, the reporting on all of this. And of course, you know, the likely suspect is the known crack addict, Hunter Biden. But I think whether it was him or somebody else, I think we all know a low-level staffer somewhere is going to take credit for this. But this is just another knock on the Biden administration. But you do have Joe Biden finally kind of rising from the dead, now going out and campaigning. And he's campaigning on Biden economics. And I don't know if he's got a real strong record there, but what do you think his chances are of convincing the American people that his economic plan is working well and building back better?
Bidenomics means you pay more for everything in life. And if you look at the difference between when he took office and now, how much does it cost to get a mortgage? Interest rates are significantly higher. How much is your grocery bill? How much does it cost to buy a new car? So all the staples of life are increasingly becoming unaffordable for average Americans. And it's a direct result of bad federal policy, borrowing and printing trillions of dollars. The Fed printing trillions of dollars over the last few years sparked a significant inflation. Of course, Biden throws gasoline on the fire, not only with his spending policies, but also how he's using the bureaucracy. He's kneecapping American domestic energy industry. He's trying to do things like DEI and ESG in the economy, which is not good for opportunity or not good for growth. And he's trying to force everybody into an electric vehicle. So all that means is it's going to increasingly be more difficult for the average family to make ends meet. And so as president, we're going to rip up all of Biden's economic policies, and we're going to restore the economy to something where people can actually succeed again.
I think the American people are itching for a Republican to be back in the White House for nothing other than just economic policies, because I think that's going to be a big driving force when people cast their votes in 2024. Before we get into some other policy things, I do have to address the elephant in the room because, Governor, I don't know if you know this about me, but I have been a longtime Trump supporter. In fact, I think I was one of the first people on the Trump train. I campaigned for him through my commentary through the 2016, 2020. I've been a vocal supporter of President Trump. However, I have gotten a lot of flack because I have looked at you and your candidacy and what you've done in Florida, and it's impressed me. So the natural thing has been the Trump supporters are very angry with me for this and for telling the truth. But because I do also represent a lot of Trump supporters, I have to ask you this, because this is what I constantly get questioned on. What do you say to those Trump supporters who say, we like Ron DeSantis, we wish he would have waited till his 2028 turn? What do you tell those people?
Well, first of all, in America, we don't have turns. People can run if they believe they have something to offer the country. And I can tell you, as somebody that's worn the country's uniform, who served in Iraq, who believes in a cause greater than myself, I believe 2024 is make or break. I don't think we have time for excuses. We're not going to get a mulligan on this one. And I think I've shown the ability to defeat the Democrats, yes, at the ballot box by winning Florida by a historic margin, but also on issue after issue. We beat them on lockdowns. We beat them on education. We beat them on ESG. We beat them on illegal immigration. We beat them on transgender athletes competing with women. On issue after issue, we didn't just talk the talk, we walk the walk. And so I'll run, I'll beat Biden. But I think even more importantly than that, I will deliver on all these things, because if we don't actually deliver, then I think we're going to end up being in a hole that's going to be very difficult to dig out of. So I think I'm the guy that can get all of that done. And I think I have a responsibility to offer myself, given that that's where I'm coming from.
I often tell people that if we don't win in 2024, there might not be a 2028, given what Democrats will do to our electoral process. So that's my next question for you. A lot of Americans out there, They want a Republican back in the White House. They support you. They support your ideals, but they say, hey, listen, everything is so messed up with our election integrity. The Democrats have this game figured out with vote by mail, early voting, ballot harvesting. How can a Republican compete? What do you tell those people, and how can you win a general election given all of those things I just mentioned?
Well, first, I think a lot of states have taken good action, including Florida, including Georgia. In Florida, we don't allow ballot harvesting. It's banned. We don't allow Zuckerbucks. It's banned. You can request an absentee ballot, but they're not allowed to send out ballots unsolicited to people. And so that is really the way forward. Many states have done that. Now, not every state has done that. So, for example, in Nevada, they have mass mail balloting. So whether you request a ballot or not, they're sending it to you. And yes, we know that if they send one to an apartment in Las Vegas, they probably send 3 to that one for the people that have been there before because they don't have accurate voter rolls. So that's a challenge. They also allow Zuckerbucks. But my view on this is we've got to fight the fight the way the Democrats are. We will have a ballot harvesting operations in the key states where it's legal when I'm the nominee. I am not going to sit back and let them rack up votes and then tell our folks not to compete on the same level. So we're going to have Zuckerbucks where it's allowed. And I think most of your viewers know Zuckerbucks is actually private money to election offices where you then send people in and then they use the election office effectively for a get out the vote effort for your team. It's not the way you want to run elections. Don't get me wrong. If I can wave a magic wand, I'd get rid of it in every state. But where it's legal, we've got to do that. So I can pledge to folks, we're not going to fight with one hand tied behind our back. We're going to exploit all areas to be able to deliver an election victory. And I think that that's very, very important. We're also going to be on the front end doing legal challenges when that's appropriate. I think what happened in 2020, they started filing a lot of these lawsuits after the election. By that time, it's too late. You've got to be very forward leaning on this, and you got to lean in on it. But then all said and done on that, in Florida, I took a state that had been a 1-point state and we won by 20 points. And so winning independent voters matters. We won women voters. We won 62% of Hispanics. The persuasion game still matters. And I think we have an opportunity to make the case to the country that Biden has failed miserably, and we have an opportunity to reverse the decline if we choose a better path. So I think we can win independent voters overwhelmingly, which will help erase whatever the Democrats are doing with the harvesting.
I agree with you. We're going to have to play the game or we're going to lose the game that we refuse to play. But I'm glad you brought up Joe Biden, because I've had a theory, Governor, for a long time. And I don't think this is so far-fetched. I do believe that California Governor Gavin Newsom is going to jump into this race at some point. I don't think he's going to oppose Biden. I think he's going to be in place of Biden. So I'm curious what you think about that theory. And also, the man has taken shot after shot after shot at you and has also become somewhat chummy with Donald Trump. So I want to get your thought on that as well.
Well, I'll tell you, California's got huge problems. I mean, this was a state that was the ideal to pursue your dreams in this country for decades. People would try to get to California. Now, since Newsom's been governor, they've lost population. They never lost population in the history of California until he became governor. I've been in places like San Francisco and LA over the last few years. These are almost post-apocalyptic images that you'll see. I saw people defecating on the sidewalk in San Francisco using drugs, fentanyl, crack openly. Of course, they have district attorneys in places like Los Angeles that don't believe in holding criminals accountable. So the inmates end up running the asylum. So I think it's been a really, really poor record. And you see all the problems. You see the problems they have just keeping the power on sometimes. And yet that governor spends so much time attacking Florida and attacking me. And yes, it's true. We've had more Californians move to Florida since I've been governor than at any time in Florida history. I never, as someone born and raised in Florida, I don't think I ever saw a California license plate in Florida growing up. I mean, why would you leave a place like San Diego or Orange County? These are great places, great weather. And I think people have left because the governance is so oppressive and so intolerable that they're picking up families and moving thousands of miles away. So to me, that's the most powerful verdict on leadership, when they're leaving your jurisdiction. And I think Florida shows we've done it well because we have people that are crawling over hot coals barefoot to be able to come move to the free state of Florida.
I think the economy is going to be a big issue in 2024, but I also think that this culture war that Republicans have just recently started playing is going to be a big part of that, and specifically when it comes to parental rights. It's amazing to me, Governor, how the left continues to dig in on their desire to have a lack of parental rights, their desire to have children belong to the collective. I know that you're somebody that's very big on parental rights, protecting kids. How is that going to play into 2024, and how do you get the message out to young voters, to maybe independent, more liberal-leaning voters, that parental rights is the issue that they should vote on?
Well, I'll tell you, I think this is going to be a blockbuster issue. I think it's somewhat of a sleeper issue because the media doesn't really understand the potency. But when you start talking about people like Biden and his ilk, what they're saying is, these are all of our kids, quote unquote, that it's not just your kids, it's quote ours. And I'm just thinking to myself, wait a minute, my wife and I have a 6, 5, and 3-year-old. They're your kids too? No. They're our kids. We're the parents. We have the fundamental right to direct their education and upbringing. And here's the thing. That is a view of the primacy of parents that is not just a Republican view. It's not just an independent view. There are a lot of Democrat parents who agree with us on this. So I think the left's playing with fire when they think that they can use schools and other institutions to supersede the rights of parents. In Florida, we've done a Parents' Bill of Rights. Of course, we did the Parents' Rights in Education and beat Disney on that, where we're saying we're not going to have things like gender ideology in the schools, particularly in these young grades. It's inappropriate. But you've actually have places around this country where schools will, quote, transition a student to a different gender behind their parents' backs. So we have to reestablish the rights of parents, not just in Florida, which we've done, but all across the country. And I think you have a left-wing movement in this country that is fundamentally hostile to the rights of parents. And I will hear people talk about, the media will say somehow by us standing up for parents, we're just trying to engage in a, quote, culture war. Let me tell you, the left is the one that's waging the culture war. We're simply standing up and fighting back against that and standing up for the freedom of our families to raise their kids the way they see fit.
Well, I agree with you because for far too long, we have ceded our ground to the left and to the liberals. We've let them have Hollywood. We've let them have popular culture, music, sports, you name it. They've had it all. And we didn't even want to play the game. We wanted to have charts and graphs and the economy and inflation, but we never even entered that ring. So I want to talk about another hot topic, and that's the integrity of women's sports. But before I do that, Governor, there has been a little bit of backlash because late last week, the DeSantis War Room Twitter account put out a video attacking Donald Trump for, I guess, his advocacy for the LGBTQ community. And some people on the Trump side, and then, of course, the liberals, some people in between, they were pretty upset at that video. It features Caitlyn Jenner and other folks. What do you say? What was the intent of that video? And it was not put out by you, but it was put out by an account linked to you. What's your response to all the backlash?
I mean, I think, identifying Donald Trump as really being a pioneer in injecting gender ideology into the mainstream, where he was having men compete against women in his beauty pageants. I think that's totally fair game because he's now campaigning saying the opposite, that he doesn't think that you should have men competing in women's things like athletics. And so we've been very clear on it, that we believe in protecting the rights of our girls and the rights of women athletes to be able to participate with fairness and with integrity. And ultimately, when you talk about some of the gender ideology that's being unleashed in this country, in the state of Florida, we are fighting back against that clearly in schools. But I think even beyond that, it's just a fundamental issue of, what role. I think it's an attack on women's rights more broadly to say that gender is fluid. And I also think it's an attack on the truth itself. When they take a swimmer who swam on the men's team for 3 years and then switches to the women's team, and they say that's the women's swim national champion, we know not only does that violate the opportunities for the other women swimmers, but we also know that that's a lie. It's not true. And I think there's value in making sure our society is rooted in truth and not in social fads.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And most Americans want to restore that common sense. I mean, this is a winning issue for you, for Republicans as a whole. I think it was just the Caitlyn Jenner images because she has been so vocal with everything that you've just said in fighting for that. But hey, listen, people are going to get mad about everything. You're never going to please anybody. Donald Trump takes so many swings at you, so it's understandable. In the minute that I have left with you, I want to pivot to a funner question, a more fun question, because you are born and raised in Florida. I know that you're also a baseball player. My husband was born and raised in Miami, Florida as well, and he actually played for the Blue Jays. So where you lived, he did all of his spring training. So I have to ask you, being that you are the governor of Florida, are you a Rays fan, a Marlins fan? Where do you lie in that battle?
Yeah, I'm a Rays fan. It's interesting, though. So he was in Dunedin. That was my home baseball field for high school because the city owned the stadium. So we practiced and played in a spring training baseball stadium. I ended up playing 4 years in college and traveled all around the country and played. And I never played on a better field in college than I did every day for high school. So we were really fortunate to grow up in a spring training city and have that support. But it's interesting with the Rays. They're a phenomenal program and franchise. They don't have as much money, and yet they managed to put out a good team on the field. But they didn't come to Tampa until I had left for college. And so while I am a Rays fan, I didn't grow up with them. I actually grew up with the Atlanta Braves because they were the only team in all the Southeast when I was a kid, and you could watch them on WTBS. And so these are the 80s and 90s Braves, not as good in the 80s. They were really good in the 90s. So I still root for Atlanta in the National League, but in the American League, I'm a Rays guy.
Well, you just made a lot of people here in Tennessee happy because this is Atlanta Braves country until we get a team in Nashville, which we're really pulling for. Governor, thank you so much for so much of your time. Best of luck to you. And we'll be watching and waiting to see what happens. It's going to be exciting to say the least.